Montana Territory, 1873. The wind howled through the Bitterroot Valley like a wounded beast, carrying snow that stung like needles against any exposed flesh. For 25-year-old Finn Prescott, this blizzard was just one more piece of evidence that life was determined to break him. The young cowboy hunched forward in his saddle, squinting against the white fury that threatened to swallow him whole. "Come on, Sable," he urged his black mare forward, "just a few more miles to the line shack." Finn had been riding for the Broken Spoke Ranch for 3 years now, ever since the war had left him with nothing but nightmares and a talent for breaking horses that were as wild and untrusting as he was. His boss had sent him to check fence lines on the northern property before the worst of winter set in. Nobody expected the season's first blizzard to arrive with such vengeful force. The cold had long since seeped through his wool coat and leather gloves, numbing his fingers until he could barely feel the reins. His face, partially protected by his scarf and hat pulled low, still burned from the relentless wind. But Finn was used to discomfort, used to fighting against nature and men alike. The frontier had taught him one thing above all: rely on no one but yourself. Attachment was a luxury that got men killed out here. A flash of color against the white landscape caught his eye. Finn reined in Sable, peering through the curtain of snow. There, almost lost in the white blur, was a wagon tilted precariously to one side, one wheel clearly broken. His first instinct was to ride on. Whoever had been foolish enough to travel in this weather wasn't his concern. The territory was unforgiving, and a man couldn't save everyone. Getting involved only led to trouble. Yet something made him turn Sable toward the stranded wagon. Perhaps it was the last shred of humanity the war hadn't stripped from him, or maybe just the knowledge that ignoring someone in peril during a Montana blizzard was tantamount to murder. As he approached, he saw a slight figure struggling to calm a pair of panicked horses. The person wore a blue woolen coat, now almost white with accumulated snow. Finn dismounted, the cold instantly biting through his pants as his boots sank into knee-deep snow. "Hello there," he called out, his voice nearly lost in the howling wind. "Need some help?" The figure turned, and Finn found himself staring into the most striking blue eyes he'd ever seen. They belonged to a young woman, her face partially obscured by a scarf, but what he could see was enough to make him pause. She couldn't be more than 22 or 23, with tendrils of golden blonde hair escaping from beneath her bonnet. "Thank God," she said, her voice trembling either from cold or fear. "The wheel broke about an hour ago. I cannot get the horses to settle." Finn approached cautiously, taking the reins from her gloved hands. The horses, a matched pair of chestnuts, were wild-eyed with terror. "You shouldn't be traveling alone in this weather, ma'am," he said, his tone more accusatory than he intended. "I had little choice in the matter, sir," she replied with unexpected spirit, "and I was not expecting a blizzard in October." Finn calmed the horses with practiced ease, his eyes scanning the broken wagon and the vast emptiness surrounding them. The line shack was still a good 3 miles away, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. "We need to get you to shelter," he said. "There's a line shack not far from here. Can you ride?" She nodded, though uncertainty flashed across her features. "What about my things?" she asked, gesturing to the wagon. "They'll have to wait. Nothing in there is worth freezing to death over." The woman hesitated, then disappeared into the wagon, emerging moments later with a small leather bag. "This is all I need." Finn unhitched her team, knowing the horses would follow Sable out of instinct. He helped the woman mount his mare, then swung up behind her. The closeness was uncomfortable for a man used to solitude, but necessary for survival. "I'm Finn Prescott," he said as they set off, his arms around her as he took the reins. "Bella Patterson," she replied, her voice barely audible above the wind. "Mrs. Patterson." The "Mrs." landed like a stone in his stomach. Of course she was married, not that it mattered to him either way. Women, especially married ones, were complications he avoided. "Where's your husband?" he asked. There was a pause before she answered, "Dead 6 months now." Widow, the word brought a different kind of complication. In the territories, young widows rarely stayed that way for long. Men outnumbered women 20-1, and a pretty widow was like water in the desert. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said mechanically. "Are you?" she asked, surprising him with her directness. "You don't know me or my husband." Finn didn't respond. She was right, after all. Empty words of sympathy were just another form of lying, and if there was one thing Finn Prescott didn't do, it was lie. The world was harsh enough without adding falsehoods to it. They rode in silence after that, the only sound the whine of the wind and the labored breathing of Sable as she pushed through the deepening snow. Finn could feel Bella shivering against him despite the layers between them. The woman was freezing, and he knew hypothermia would set in soon if they didn't reach shelter. The line shack appeared like a mirage through the white haze, a simple one-room structure with a small corral attached. Finn had never been so glad to see such a humble abode. He dismounted first, then helped Bella down. Her legs buckled beneath her and he caught her before she hit the snow. "Sorry," she whispered, "I cannot seem to feel my feet." Without hesitation, Finn swept her into his arms and carried her to the door of the shack. Setting her down momentarily, he pushed it open, then brought her inside. The interior was Spartan: a small stove, a narrow cot, a rough-hewn table with a single chair and basic supplies. But it was shelter from the storm, and right now that was all that mattered. "I need to tend to the horses," he said, setting her gently on the cot. "Get those wet clothes off and wrap yourself in that blanket. I'll bring in firewood." He didn't wait for her response before heading back out into the blizzard. Taking care of the animals gave him a moment to collect his thoughts. This was not how he'd planned to spend the next few days. He'd expected solitude, not the company of a beautiful young widow who looked at him with eyes that seemed to see right through his carefully constructed walls. By the time he returned with an armful of firewood from the linta beside the shack, Bella had removed her wet outer garments. She sat on the cot wrapped in the rough blanket, her blonde hair falling in damp waves past her shoulders. Her dress, a simple gray wool, was mostly dry, but her stockinged feet were pale and bluish. Finn busied himself with starting a fire, deliberately keeping his back to her as the flames caught and began to warm the small space. He hung her coat and scarf near the stove to dry, avoiding looking directly at her. "Thank you for saving my life, Mr. Prescott," she said softly. "Don't thank me yet. We're still stuck in this shack until the storm passes, which could be days. Nevertheless, I would have died out there without your help." Finn shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "We both know that's not true," she said, "especially not in these territories." He couldn't argue with that. The frontier bred a particular kind of hardness in men, a willingness to look the other way when someone else was in trouble. It was how most survived. Helping others often meant endangering yourself, and few were willing to take that risk. "Why were you traveling alone?" he asked, changing the subject. Bella's gaze dropped to her hands, which she was rubbing together to restore circulation. "I was on my way to Helena. I have a position there as a schoolteacher." A schoolteacher? Finn couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. Educated women were rare in the territory. She nodded. "I taught in Chicago before I married. After Thomas died, I needed to make my own way. The school board in Helena was desperate enough to hire a widow sight unseen. Chicago to Montana territory is quite a change." A sad smile touched her lips. "Thomas always talked about the beauty of Montana. He grew up here, I thought. I thought perhaps I could find some piece of him in the land he loved." Finn didn't know how to respond to such raw honesty. His own approach to grief had been to bury it so deep that it could never surface. This woman wore hers openly, like a badge of both pain and pride. Instead of speaking, he busied himself with making coffee on the stove, using the supplies kept stocked in the lined shack. The familiar routine gave him something to focus on besides the stranger sharing his temporary shelter. "Are you hungry?" he asked, pulling out some jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags. "Famished, actually," she admitted. He handed her a tin cup of black coffee and some of the food, watching as she sipped the bitter brew without complaint. Many city women would have turned up their noses at such fare. "It's not much," he said apologetically. "It's warm and filling, that's all that matters." Night fell quickly and the storm showed no signs of abating. The wind rattled the single window and snow piled against the door. Inside, the stove provided enough heat to keep the worst of the cold at bay, but the small space meant they couldn't avoid each other's presence. Finn sat on the floor, his back against the wall, while Bella remained on the cot. The silence between them grew awkward as the hours passed. "How long have you been in Montana, Mr. Prescott?" she finally asked. "3 years, and you can call me Finn." 3 years. "And before that?" Finn took a long sip of his coffee before answering. "I fought for the Union. After the war, there wasn't much left for me back east." "The war took much from many people," she said quietly. "That it did." Bella studied him in the dim light cast by the stove. "You don't seem like most cowboys I've encountered." "How many cowboys have you encountered, Mrs. Patterson?" A flush colored her cheeks. "Fair point, not many. But you speak well and you carry yourself differently." Finn shifted uncomfortably. He didn't like being observed so closely. My mother was a schoolteacher, he admitted reluctantly. She insisted I get an education, even after my father died. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. The past tense hung in the air between them, another loss, another reason to keep people at arm's length. I'm sorry, Bella said. Don't be, it was a long time ago, Finn stood abruptly. You should get some sleep, take the cot, I'll sleep on the floor. But, I've slept on worse, trust me. Bella looked like she wanted to argue but nodded instead. Thank you. For everything. Finn merely grunted in response, spreading his bedroll on the floor as far from the cot as the small space would allow. He lay down with his back to her, listening as she settled in for the night. Sleep, however, proved elusive. The storm continued its assault on the small shack, and the woman's presence filled the room in ways that went beyond the physical. It had been a long time since Finn had shared space with another person like this, especially a woman. Morning brought no respite from the blizzard. If anything, it had intensified overnight. Finn woke to find Bella already up, attempting to rekindle the fire in the stove. Here, let me, he said, his voice rough from sleep. She moved aside, watching as he expertly built up the fire. Have you been awake long? An hour or so, I didn't want to disturb you. Finn nodded, appreciating her consideration. Many would have woken him without thought. Looks like we're stuck here for at least another day, he said, glancing out the frosted window. Maybe longer. Bella's face fell slightly, but she quickly composed herself. At least we have shelter and company. Finn wasn't sure if the latter was actually a benefit, but he kept that thought to himself. The day passed slowly. They rationed the food and melted snow for water. Conversation came in fits and starts, sometimes flowing naturally, other times drying up like a creek bed in August. Finn learned that Bella was 22, born and raised in Boston before moving to Chicago after marrying Thomas Patterson, who had been 15 years her senior. Thomas had been a successful merchant who'd invested unwisely and left his young wife with nothing but debts when pneumonia claimed him last spring. In turn, Finn found himself sharing more than he intended, about growing up in Pennsylvania, about joining the army at 18, eager to fight for the Union, about the horrors he'd witnessed at Gettysburg and Cold Harbor, about drifting west afterward, unable to settle back into civilian life among people who couldn't understand what he'd seen. And now you're a cowboy, Bella said, sitting cross-legged on the cot while Finn checked their supplies. Now I'm a cowboy, he agreed. It suits me. Long hours, hard work, not much talking required. You seem to be talking plenty now, she observed with the hint of a smile. Finn paused, realizing she was right. He'd said more in the past day than he typically did in a month. Must be the close quarters making me addled. Or perhaps you just needed someone to listen. There was no judgment in her tone, just a simple observation that struck uncomfortably close to home. Finn had spent years keeping people at a distance, convinced that connections only led to pain. Yet here he was, sharing pieces of himself with a stranger. What will you do in Helena? He asked, changing the subject. Teach, of course. And try to build a life for myself, a fresh start. Do you have family back east who could have helped you? Bella shook her head. My parents passed when I was 16. I have an aunt in Philadelphia, but she barely has enough for herself. No, this is my path now. Finn admired her courage, though he'd never say so aloud. A young, beautiful woman traveling alone to the territories to start anew took more grit than many men possessed. The winters here are brutal, he warned. Nothing like Chicago, and the isolation can wear on a person. Are you trying to frighten me, Mr. Prescott? Just stating facts, Mrs. Patterson. Montana territory isn't kind to the unprepared. Then I shall have to be prepared, won't I? Her blue eyes flashed with determination that both impressed and concerned him. By the second night, the walls Finn had built around himself were beginning to crack. He found himself watching Bella when she wasn't looking, the graceful way she moved in the small space, the thoughtful expressions that crossed her face as she stared into the fire, the strength that seemed to radiate from her despite her delicate appearance. It was dangerous, this awareness. Finn had learned long ago that wanting things, especially people, only led to disappointment. The frontier was no place for tender feelings. People died, moved on, betrayed you. Better to expect nothing and never be surprised. On the morning of the third day, the storm finally began to abate. The howling wind calmed to a whisper, and the relentless snowfall eased. Finn stepped outside to check on the horses and assess the situation, the cold air filling his lungs with a sharpness that cleared his head. The landscape had been transformed, blanketed in snow several feet deep in places. The wagon was now completely buried, only the top visible above the white expanse. It would take days to dig it out, and the wheel would still need repair. When he returned to the shack, Bella looked up expectantly. "The storm's past," he said, "but the snow's deep, too deep to travel safely yet, especially for a woman alone." "I'm hardly made of glass, Mr. Prescott." "No, but you're not familiar with these conditions either. Even experienced riders can get lost in snow like this, and your wagon is buried." Bella's shoulders sagged slightly. "How long?" "At least another day for the snow to settle and compact, then maybe 2 days' ride to reach the nearest town." Finn hesitated before adding, "The ranch house is closer." "My boss would give you shelter until proper arrangements can be made for your journey to Helena." Hope brightened her features. "You would take me there." Finn nodded, though part of him questioned the wisdom of prolonging their association. "It's on my way back anyway." "Thank you, I don't know what I would have done without your help." There it was again, that gratitude that made him uncomfortable. Finn turned away, busying himself with their meager supplies. "We'll leave tomorrow if conditions allow." The fourth day dawned clear and blindingly bright, the sun reflecting off the snow with diamond brilliance. They set out mid-morning, Bella once again riding with Finn on Sable, her horses following behind. The going was slow, the mare having to forge a path through the deep snow. Bella sat stiffly at first, clearly trying to maintain as much distance as propriety allowed while sharing a saddle. But as the hours passed and fatigue set in, she gradually relaxed against Finn's chest, her head occasionally nodding as she dozed. Finn found himself oddly protective of the weight against him, adjusting his hold to ensure she wouldn't slip. It had been so long since he'd been this close to another person, let alone a woman. The scent of her hair, somehow still faintly floral despite days without proper washing, was distracting in ways he didn't want to examine. They made camp that night in a sheltered copse of pines where the snow wasn't as deep. Finn built a fire and set up a crude lean-to with a tarp from his pack. It wasn't much protection, but it would keep the worst of the night chill away. Bella watched him work with admiration. "You make survival look easy." Finn snorted. "Nothing about survival is easy, but it can be simple if you know what you're doing." "And you clearly do." She accepted the jerky he handed her, chewing thoughtfully. "Have you always been on your own?" The question caught him off guard. "What makes you think I'm on my own?" "Something in your eyes," she said simply, "a kind of solitude that goes beyond just being alone." Finn stared into the fire, uncomfortable with her perception. "Being alone is safer." "Safer than what?" "Than counting on people who'll eventually leave or die." The words came out harsher than he intended. Bella was quiet for a long moment. "That's a lonely way to live, Finn." "It's a realistic way to live out here." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. "I've seen what happens to men who let themselves care too much. They break when they lose what they love. I won't be broken again." The admission hung in the cold air between them. Finn immediately regretted it, feeling exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the physical elements. "We're all broken in some way," Bella said softly. "That doesn't mean we stop living." "There's a difference between living and merely surviving," Finn countered. "I made my choice long ago." "And yet you stopped to help a stranger in a blizzard." Her blue eyes reflected the firelight, challenging him. "That doesn't sound like someone who's given up on humanity." Finn had no answer for that. Instead, he stood abruptly. "We should get some sleep. We've got a long ride tomorrow." That night, lying under the stars with the fire dying between them, Finn couldn't stop turning her words over in his mind. Had he given up on humanity, or just on the possibility that he deserved a place in it? The following day brought them within sight of the Broken Spoke Ranch by late afternoon. The main house and outbuildings sat nestled in a valley, smoke rising from chimneys in welcome plumes against the cold blue sky. Bella straightened in the saddle at the sight, and Finn felt a strange reluctance knowing their journey was near its end. Samuel Rollins, the ranch owner, greeted them with surprise and hospitality. A burly man with a thick gray beard, he took one look at Bella and immediately ordered hot food and baths prepared. "Mrs. Patterson will need a room for a few days," Finn explained, standing awkwardly in the ranch house parlor while Bella was shown to a guest room by Mrs. Rollins. "Her wagon broke down in the storm. She was heading to Helena for a teaching position." Rollins nodded, stroking his beard thoughtfully. Mighty lucky you found her, Prescott. Not many would have survived that blizzard alone. Just happened upon her, Finn said, downplaying his role. Anyone would have helped. Not anyone, Rollins contradicted, echoing Bella's words from days earlier. You did good, son. The praise made Finn uncomfortable, as did the knowing look in his boss's eyes. I should check on the horses, he muttered, excusing himself. The next few days settled into an unexpected routine. Bella integrated herself into ranch life with grace and determination, helping Mrs. Rollins with household tasks and charming the bunkhouse cowboys with her genuine interest in their work. Finn found himself watching her from a distance, noting how naturally she adapted to frontier life despite her city background. Your widow's something special, Rollins commented one evening as they checked on a pregnant mare in the stable. She's not my widow, Finn corrected sharply. Maybe not, but she looks at you like she might not mind being. Finn snorted, dismissing the observation. She's just grateful. She'll be on her way to Helena soon enough. Rollins shrugged, maybe so, though Helena's schoolteacher position was filled last week, got word yesterday. Seems they couldn't wait for her arrival after the storm delayed so many travelers. The news hit Finn like a physical blow. Does she know? Not yet, figured you might want to tell her, seeing as you rescued her and all. Finn wanted no such thing. The thought of being the bearer of such news, of seeing the hope drain from Bella's face, made his stomach twist. But he owed her that much, at least. He found her in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Rollins prepare dinner. The domestic scene, Bella with flour on her cheek and her golden hair tied back with a simple ribbon, stirred something in him he thought long buried. Mrs. Patterson, might I have a word? She looked up, her smile fading slightly at his serious expression. Of course. They stepped onto the porch, the winter sunset painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. Bella wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, her breath visible in the cold air. What is it, Finn? You look troubled. He took a deep breath. Mr. Rollins received word from Helena, the teaching position. They filled it last week when you didn't arrive. Bella's face paled, her hands tightening on her shawl. I see. I'm sorry, he said, meaning it. The storm delayed so many travelers they couldn't wait. She nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. It seems I have a talent for finding myself with nowhere to go. The defeat in her voice stirred something protective in Finn. Before he could think better of it, he said, You could stay here. Bella looked up sharply. Here. The Rollins have been looking for help around the house. Mrs. Rollins isn't young anymore, and with 20 cowhands to feed and care for, he trailed off, realizing how presumptuous he sounded. It's just an idea, until spring when travel would be easier and you could find another position. Hope flickered across her face. Do you think they would consider it? Mrs. Rollins already mentioned it to me. She's taken a liking to you. A small smile curved Bella's lips. And you, have you taken a liking to me as well, Mr. Prescott? The direct question caught him off guard. Finn looked away, focusing on the distant mountains. What I think doesn't matter. This would be between you and the Rollins. It matters to me, she said quietly. Finn met her gaze then, seeing something in her blue eyes that frightened and exhilarated him in equal measure. I think you're stronger than you know, Mrs. Patterson, and I think Helena's loss could be the broken spoke's gain. It wasn't quite an answer to her question, but it was as much as he could give. Bella seemed to understand, nodding slowly. Then I shall speak with Mrs. Rollins about staying on, at least until spring. Winter settled over the ranch, bringing with it short days and long nights. Bella took up residence in a small room off the kitchen, quickly making herself indispensable to the household. She helped with cooking and cleaning, mended clothes, and even set up informal reading lessons for some of the younger cowhands in the evenings. Finn found himself lingering in the main house more often than usual, inventing reasons to be near where Bella worked. Something about her presence made the harsh Montana winter seem less bleak, though he refused to examine that feeling too closely. Christmas approached, bringing a festive atmosphere to the ranch despite the isolation. Mrs. Rollins planned a dinner for all the hands, and Bella threw herself into the preparations with enthusiasm. I haven't celebrated a proper Christmas since before Thomas died, she confided to Finn as they decorated the main house with pine boughs and red ribbons. It feels good to have something to look forward to. Finn, balanced on a ladder to hang a wreath, glanced down at her. The joy in her face as she arranged candles on the mantel made his chest tighten. Did you and your husband have many happy Christmases? A shadow crossed her features briefly. Thomas was often away on business during the holidays. But he always brought me beautiful gifts upon his return. Gifts aren't the same as presents, Finn observed, then immediately regretted his boldness. Forgive me. It's not my place to comment on your marriage. No, you're right, Bella said thoughtfully. I think I always knew that but didn't want to admit it. Thomas was a good man, but his business always came first. I was secondary. The admission seemed to surprise her as much as it did Finn. She quickly busied herself with the candles again, a flush coloring her cheeks. What about you? She asked after a moment. How do you usually spend Christmas? Working, Finn said simply. Cattle need tending even on holidays. That sounds lonely. It's just another day. Bella looked up at him, determination in her eyes. Not this year. This year you'll celebrate with us, I insist. Finn found himself agreeing, powerless against her enthusiasm. The truth was, he wanted to see her face lit by candlelight on Christmas Eve, wanted to be part of whatever joy she found in the holiday. The realization was disturbing, a crack in the armor he'd built around himself. Christmas Eve arrived with clear skies and bitter cold. The ranch hands gathered in the main house, cleaned up and on their best behavior. Mrs. Rollins and Bella had outdone themselves, preparing a feast that made the long table groan under its weight. Candles glowed in every window, and a small pine tree stood in the corner, decorated with popcorn strings and paper ornaments that Bella had crafted with care. Finn arrived late, having volunteered for the evening check of the livestock. He slipped in quietly, hoping to take a seat at the far end of the table, but Bella spotted him immediately. Finn, we saved you a seat. She patted the empty chair beside her, ignoring the knowing looks from the other cowboys. Dinner was a rowdy, joyful affair, with food and drink flowing freely. Afterward, someone produced a fiddle, and impromptu dancing began in the cleared space of the parlor. Finn stood back, watching as the younger hands took turns spinning Bella around the floor. Her laughter filled the room, her cheeks flushed with exertion and happiness. You should ask her to dance, Mrs. Rollins said, appearing at his elbow. I don't dance, Finn replied automatically. The older woman clicked her tongue. Everyone can dance. Some just choose not to. Before Finn could respond, Bella approached, slightly breathless from the last reel. Are you hiding, Mr. Prescott? She teased. Or merely gathering courage to ask me to dance? Mrs. Rollins chuckled and wandered off, leaving Finn trapped by Bella's expectant gaze. He cleared his throat awkwardly. I'm afraid I'd step all over your toes, Mrs. Patterson. I'll risk it, she held out her hand, please. One dance on Christmas Eve. How could he refuse? Finn took her hand, allowing her to lead him into the circle of dancers just as the fiddler started a slower tune. He placed his hand tentatively at her waist, keeping a respectful distance between them as they began to move. See. Not so terrible, Bella said softly. The night is young, I haven't crushed your feet yet. She laughed, the sound warming him more effectively than whiskey ever could. Where did you learn to dance? I thought you said you didn't. I said I don't, not that I can't, Finn corrected. My mother insisted I learn, said every gentleman should know how to dance properly. She was right, Bella's eyes softened. You miss her. It wasn't a question, but Finn nodded anyway. She died when I was 17, just before I enlisted. Is that why you joined the army, because she was gone? Finn had never considered it that way, but the insight struck him as true. Maybe there wasn't much keeping me home after she passed. They danced in silence for a moment, the fiddle's mournful notes filling the space between them. Then Bella said, she would be proud of the man you've become, Finn. You didn't know her. Or me's really. I know enough, she insisted. I know you risked your life to save a stranger in a blizzard. I know you're kind to the horses and respectful to Mrs. Rollins. I know you pretend not to care about anything, but you watch over everyone on this ranch like they're your responsibility. Finn stumbled slightly, disconcerted by her observations. You've been watching me. Bella met his gaze steadily. Yes, just as you've been watching me. The honesty between them was suddenly too raw, too dangerous. Finn stepped back as the music ended, releasing her waist. Thank you for the dance, Mrs. Patterson. He retreated to the porch, needing the cold air to clear his head. The night sky stretched above him, stars sharp and brilliant against the black expanse. Finn took deep breaths, trying to regain his composure. The door opened behind him, and he knew without turning that it was Bella. Her scent, soap and cinnamon and something uniquely her, drifted to him on the cold air. You left rather abruptly, she said, coming to stand beside him at the porch railing. Needed some air. Did I say something to upset you? Finn sighed, his breath forming a cloud in the frigid night. No, you just see too much. Is that so terrible to be seen? It can be, he admitted. When you've spent years making sure no one looks too closely. Bella was quiet for a moment, then reached into her pocket. I have something for you, a Christmas gift. She held out a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a simple string. Finn stared at it, then at her, confusion evident in his expression. You didn't need to get me anything. I wanted to, she said simply. Open it. Reluctantly, he took the package and unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a handkerchief clearly homemade, with his initials embroidered in one corner in neat blue stitching. I noticed you didn't have one, Bella explained. Every gentleman should have a proper handkerchief. Finn ran his thumb over the embroidered FP, touched by the simple gift and the thought behind it. Thank you, I didn't get you anything. You gave me my life, she reminded him. That's gift enough for a lifetime. Their eyes met in the moonlight, and something shifted between them, a recognition of feelings neither was ready to name. Finn felt himself leaning toward her, drawn by a force he couldn't resist. The porch door banged open, startling them apart. One of the younger cowboys stumbled out, clearly having enjoyed too much Christmas cheer, completely oblivious to the moment he'd interrupted. I should go back inside, Bella murmured, a flush visible on her cheeks even in the dim light. Merry Christmas, Finn. She slipped past him, leaving Finn alone with the handkerchief and the ghosts of what might have been. January brought even deeper cold and a rhythm to ranch life that Bella fit into seamlessly. Finn found himself looking for her each morning as he headed out to work, sometimes lingering over breakfast just to exchange a few words. The other hands noticed, of course, their teasing good-natured but relentless. When are you gonna stop mooning over the widow and do something about it? His friend Hank asked one afternoon as they repaired fence lines. I'm not mooning over anyone, Finn protested, driving a post into the frozen ground with more force than necessary. Sure you ain't. That's why you're wearing that fancy handkerchief she made you and finding excuses to be wherever she is. Finn touched the handkerchief in his pocket unconsciously, then scowled at Hank's knowing grin. She's still in mourning. 6 months of mourning for a man 15 years her senior who, by her own admission, was hardly ever home. Hank shook his head. Sounds to me like she's done her duty by the dead and is ready to look to the living. Finn didn't respond, but the words stayed with him, needling at his carefully constructed defenses. Was Bella really interested in him, or was she simply grateful to the man who'd saved her life? And even if she did feel something for him, what could he offer her? A cowboy's life was no life for a woman like Bella Patterson. February brought a thaw, the first hint that winter's grip might eventually loosen. It also brought trouble in the form of Jasper Moore, a ranch hand from the neighboring spread who'd had his eye on Bella since first seeing her in town. Moore showed up at the Broken Spoke one afternoon, ostensibly to discuss business with Rollins. But Finn, returning from checking on the herd, spotted him cornering Bella near the chicken coop, standing too close as she tried to edge away. Is there a problem here? Finn asked, his voice deceptively calm as he approached. Moore, a tall man with a perpetual sneer, didn't back away from Bella. No problem, just getting acquainted with the pretty widow everyone's talking about. Well, now you're acquainted, Finn said coldly, and Mr. Rollins is waiting for you in the house. I'll find my own way, Moore said, his eyes never leaving Bella's face. Maybe I'll come calling again soon, Mrs. Patterson, when there are fewer interruptions. Only after Moore sauntered away did Finn notice Bella's trembling hands. Did he hurt you? She shook her head. No, the way he looked at me, like I was something to consume. Anger surged through Finn, hot and unfamiliar. He wanted to follow Moore and teach him a lesson about respecting women, especially this woman. But Bella's hand on his arm stopped him. Don't, she said softly, he's not worth it. If he bothers you again, you tell me, Finn insisted. Promise me, Bella. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and they both noticed. She nodded, her blue eyes wide. I promise. Moore didn't return immediately, but his presence lingered like a shadow over the ranch. Finn found himself watching Bella more protectively, aware of her vulnerability in a way he hadn't been before. And with that awareness came a growing recognition of his own feelings he'd spent years denying he was capable of having. One evening in late February, Bella found Finn in the stable, tending to a horse with a cut leg. Mrs. Rollins sent me to tell you supper's ready, she said, lingering in the doorway. Finn nodded, continuing to clean the wound. I'll be along shortly. Instead of leaving, Bella entered the stable, coming to stand beside him. Can I help? I'm almost done, just need to wrap it now. She watched as he expertly bandaged the horse's leg, his movements gentle despite his large hands. When he finished, she said, You're good with them. The horses. Finn shrugged, patting the mare's neck. They're honest creatures. No pretense, no hidden motives. Unlike people. Unlike most people, he agreed. Bella studied him in the lantern light, her expression thoughtful. Is that why you prefer their company? Because you've been hurt by people who weren't honest. Finn busied himself with putting away the medical supplies, uncomfortable with her perception. Maybe I just like the quiet. I don't believe that's all it is. She stepped closer, her nearness making his heart race. I think you're afraid. Afraid of what? He asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Of feeling something, of caring for someone who might leave. Finn stared at her, caught between the desire to deny her words and the shocking recognition of their truth. That's a dangerous game you're playing, Bella. It's not a game to me, she said softly, and I don't think it is to you either, no matter how much you pretend otherwise. Before he could respond, shouts erupted from the direction of the main house. They both turned toward the commotion, the moment between them shattered. Fire, someone yelled, fire in the bunkhouse. Finn bolted from the stable, Bella closed behind. The scene that greeted them was chaos. Flames licked up the side of the bunkhouse, hungry and fast in the dry winter air. Cowboys scrambled to form a bucket line from the well, while others rushed to save what belongings they could. What happened? Finn demanded, grabbing a passing hand. Lamp got knocked over, the man gasped. It's spreading fast. Finn joined the bucket line, working tirelessly as they fought to contain the blaze. Bella worked alongside the men, her dress soaked and soot streaking her face as she passed buckets with the same determination she showed in everything. After what seemed like hours, they managed to extinguish the fire, though the bunkhouse was severely damaged. As they stood assessing the destruction, Rollins approached Finn, his expression grim. This wasn't an accident, he said quietly. Someone started it deliberately. Finn stared at him. Who would do that? Found this under the porch. Rollins held up a distinctive silver spur, one Finn recognized immediately. More, he growled. Rollins nodded. Must have been his idea of revenge for being sent away from Mrs. Patterson. Coward didn't even have the guts to confront us directly. Finn's hands clenched into fists. I'll ride to the Crawford spread first thing tomorrow. He needs to answer for this. No need, Rollins said grimly. Sheriff's already been sent for. This is attempted murder, burning a bunkhouse with men inside. More will hang if they catch him. Finn nodded, though part of him wanted personal vengeance. He glanced around, suddenly realizing he didn't see Bella among the group. Where's Mrs. Patterson? Helping Mrs. Rollins tend to Burns and Tucker, Rollins said, referring to two hands who'd suffered smoke inhalation. They're in the house. Finn found Bella in the kitchen, her sleeves rolled up as she applied salve to Burns's reddened hands. She looked up as he entered, relief washing over her face. You're all right, she breathed. I'm fine, he assured her. How are they? They'll recover. The smoke was worst near their bunks. Finn waited until she'd finished tending to the injured men before pulling her aside. It was more, he said quietly. He set the fire. Bella paled. Because of me. Don't, Finn said sharply. This isn't your fault. More as a vindictive coward who couldn't stand being refused. But if I hadn't come here, then you'd have frozen to death in that blizzard, Finn interrupted. And I'd never have known what I was missing. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Bella's eyes widened, and Finn found himself unable to look away from her gaze, unable to deny the truth any longer. And what would you have missed, Finn? She asked softly. Before he could answer, Mrs. Rollins called for Bella's help with the other injured man. The moment shattered, Finn watched her go, the unspoken words burning in his throat. That night, with the ranch hands crowded into the main house and barn, Finn volunteered for watch duty, patrolling the property in case Moore returned. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead as he made his rounds. Near midnight, he spotted a figure on the porch of the main house. His hand moved to his gun until he recognized Bella's outline in the moonlight. She was wrapped in a heavy shawl, her golden hair loose around her shoulders. You should be inside, he said, approaching. It's too cold out here. I couldn't sleep, she admitted. Too many thoughts. Finn nodded, understanding all too well. Moore won't come back tonight. The sheriff will have men looking for him by now. It's not just Moore I'm thinking about. She turned to face him, her expression serious in the moonlight. What were you going to say earlier? About what you would have missed. Finn hesitated, years of self-protection warring with the feelings that had grown impossible to ignore. I would have missed knowing you, he finally said, his voice low. Missed seeing how strong you are, how kind. How you face each day with hope despite everything you've lost. Bella stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his face. And is that all you would have missed, knowing me? No, he admitted, the word barely audible. I would have missed this feeling. This impossible feeling that makes me want things I've denied myself for years. What things, Finn? She pressed, now close enough that he could see the flecks of darker blue in her eyes. A home, he whispered. Not just a place to sleep, but a real home, with someone who sees me as I am and stays anyway. Bella reached up, her cold fingers touching his cheek with exquisite gentleness. I see you, Finn Prescott. I've seen you from the moment you found me in that blizzard, and I'm not going anywhere. The last of Finn's resistance crumbled under her touch. He pulled her into his arms, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that felt like coming home after years of wandering. Bella's arms wound around his neck, holding him as if she feared he might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Finn rested his forehead against hers. I've been fighting this since the day I found you. I know, she murmured. I could see the battle in your eyes every time you looked at me. I was afraid, he admitted, afraid of wanting something I might lose. And now I'm more afraid of never having it at all. He kissed her again, sealing the truth of his words. The following weeks brought changes to the Broken Spoke Ranch. Moore was captured trying to flee the territory and imprisoned awaiting trial. The bunkhouse was rebuilt, the ranch hands working together with renewed camaraderie after their shared ordeal. And Finn Prescott courted Bella Patterson openly, much to the delight of Mrs. Rollins and the good-natured ribbing of his fellow cowboys. They took rides across the thawing landscape, shared meals with the Rollins, and spent evenings talking by the fire, learning each other's histories and dreams. Finn learned that Bella's marriage to Thomas Patterson had been one of convenience rather than passion, an escape from the poverty that had followed her parents' deaths. Thomas had been kind but distant, more interested in his business ventures than in building a true partnership with his young wife. In turn, Finn shared the deeper scars of his war experience, the friends he'd lost at Gettysburg, the guilt he carried for surviving when so many hadn't. He told her about his mother's death from consumption and his father's earlier passing in a farming accident. About his decision to head west after the war, seeking space and solitude to heal wounds both physical and invisible. I never thought I'd find anyone who understood, he confessed one evening as they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple. Someone I could tell these things to without feeling judged. Bella leaned against him, her hand in his. That's what love does, Finn. It creates a safe place to be your true self. Love, the word hung in the air between them, acknowledged but not yet directly spoken. Finn tightened his grip on her hand, not yet ready to say it aloud but feeling it with every beat of his heart. Spring arrived in earnest by April, the land reawakening with green shoots and birdsong. Moore's trial was set for May in Helena, with both Finn and Bella called to testify about the fire and the events leading up to it. Will you stay in Helena afterward? Finn asked the night before they were to depart, the question that had been haunting him for weeks finally voiced. Bella looked up from the book she'd been reading, surprise evident in her expression. Why would I stay in Helena? The teaching position, there might be another opening. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You think I still want to be a teacher in Helena after everything that's happened? Finn shifted uncomfortably. It was your plan. Your fresh start. My fresh start happened the moment you found me in that blizzard, she said firmly. I have no desire to stay in Helena or anywhere else that isn't here with you. Relief flooded through him, but uncertainty remained. What about your dreams, your independence? Bella set her book aside and moved to kneel before him where he sat in the chair by the fire. My dream was to build a life that mattered, to find purpose and belonging. She took his hands in hers. I've found that here with you. Finn pulled her onto his lap, holding her close. I don't have much to offer you, Bella, just a cowboy's wages and a heart that's been broken and mended too many times. That's all I want, she whispered against his neck, your heart, however scarred it may be. They traveled to Helena the next day, the journey far different from their first desperate ride through the blizzard. The town bustled with the energy of spring, new construction rising alongside established businesses as Montana territory continued to grow. Moore's trial was swift and decisive. With multiple witnesses to his threats against Bella and evidence of the deliberate fire, he was sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison. Justice, while cold comfort for the damage done, at least ensured he would threaten them no more. On their final night in Helena, Finn took Bella to dinner at the finest restaurant in town. She wore a new blue dress that matched her eyes, her golden hair arranged in an elegant style that made his breath catch when she appeared in the hotel lobby. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Her smile was radiant. "Thank you, you clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Prescott." Finn offered his arm, feeling uncharacteristically nervous as they walked to the restaurant. The small box in his pocket seemed to burn against his thigh, a constant reminder of what he planned to do tonight. After dinner, he suggested a walk through the town's small park, now green with new spring growth. As they strolled beneath budding trees, Finn gathered his courage. "Bella," he began, stopping and turning to face her, "when I found you in that blizzard, I thought I was just saving your life. I didn't realize you'd be saving mine, too." She tilted her head, her eyes soft in the lamplight. "Saving you. From the loneliness I'd convinced myself was safety, from the walls I'd built that were really just a prison." He took her hands in his. "I spent years believing that caring for someone was a weakness I couldn't afford, that love was a luxury not meant for men like me." Tears gathered in Bella's eyes, but she remained silent, letting him find his words. "You showed me I was wrong," Finn continued. "You made me want to be brave in ways that have nothing to do with facing blizzards or outlaws, brave enough to trust again. To hope again." He dropped to one knee, pulling the small box from his pocket. Bella gasped as he opened it, revealing a simple gold ring set with a small sapphire. "Bella Patterson, I love you. Will you marry me and make the Broken Spoke our home? Will you be my wife, my heart, my everything?" "Yes," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes, Finn, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, then stood to pull her into his arms. Their kiss was a promise, a beginning, a homecoming all at once. "I love you," she murmured against his lips. "I've loved you since you carried me through the snow to that little shack and saved my life." "I think I've loved you just as long," he admitted. "I was just too stubborn to admit it." They returned to the Broken Spoke as an engaged couple, met with hearty congratulations from the Rollins and good-natured teasing from the ranch hands. Plans were made for a June wedding on the ranch, a celebration that would bring together the community that had become Bella's new family. As the wedding day approached, Rollins called Finn into his office one afternoon. The older man sat behind his desk, looking uncharacteristically serious. "Got something to discuss with you, Prescott," he said, gesturing for Finn to take a seat. "Been thinking about my future." "And yours?" Finn sat, curious about the direction of this conversation. "Mrs. Rollins and I never had children of our own," the rancher continued. "Been running this place for 30 years now, and we're not getting any younger." "You thinking of selling the Broken Spoke?" Finn asked, alarmed at the prospect. Rollins shook his head. "Number thinking of taking on a partner, someone who knows the land and the business. Someone who cares about this place almost as much as I do." It took a moment for Finn to understand what Rollins was suggesting. "Me." "You," Rollins confirmed. "I'd retain majority ownership until I'm ready to retire completely. But you'd have a real stake in the place, a future to offer that bride of yours beyond a cowhand's wages." Finn was speechless, overwhelmed by the offer. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Rollins said gruffly. "You're the best man I've got, Prescott, and seeing you with Bella these past months, well, it's clear you've found what matters in life. A man who understands that will make a good partner in business too." Finn extended his hand, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, I won't let you down." Rollins shook his hand firmly. "I know you won't. Now go tell that pretty fiancé of yours that you're about to become a rancher instead of just a cowboy." Bella's joy at the news matched his own. That night, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies rise from the grass, she nestled against his side in what had become their favorite position. "When I was stuck in that blizzard, I thought I was going to die," she said softly. "I remember praying not just for rescue, but for a sign that there was still purpose in my life, that all the loss and hardship had meaning." Finn kissed the top of her head, and then I showed up. She tilted her face up to his, smiling. And then you showed up, my answer, my miracle. Strange to think that if that wheel hadn't broken, if that blizzard hadn't hit, our paths might never have crossed, he mused. I don't believe that, Bella said with conviction. I think we were meant to find each other, Finn. Some things are written in the stars, not by chance. When did you get so philosophical? He teased. When I fell in love with a cowboy who pretended not to have a heart of gold, she countered, leaning up to kiss him. Their wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the kind of June day that seemed made for celebrations. Wildflowers decorated the ranch house and yard, and guests from neighboring ranches gathered to witness the union of the cowboy and the widow who had found each other in a blizzard. Finn stood beneath an arch of woven branches, more nervous than he'd ever been facing down outlaws or stampedes. But when Bella appeared on Rollins's arm, all his anxiety melted away. She wore a simple white dress with a crown of wildflowers in her golden hair, and the love shining in her blue eyes as she walked toward him was all the reassurance he needed. Dearly beloved, the minister began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd, we are assembled here to join this man and this woman in the bonds of matrimony. Finn barely heard the words, lost in Bella's gaze as they stood hand in hand. When it came time for their vows, he spoke from his heart. Bella, I spent years believing that the only way to survive was to keep everyone at a distance, to never need anyone, to never want anything I might lose. Then a blizzard brought you into my life and everything changed. His voice grew husky with emotion. You showed me that real strength isn't in standing alone, but in having the courage to love despite all risks. I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. To build a home and a future with you that's filled with the joy and hope you've brought to my heart. Tears sparkled in Bella's eyes as she spoke her own vows. Finn, when I was lost in that storm, I thought my life might end before it truly began, but instead I found the beginning of everything I ever wanted. In you I found not just a rescuer, but a partner, a friend, and a love beyond anything I dared to dream. I promise to stand by your side through whatever storms life brings, to be your comfort, your strength, and your home. To love you with all that I am for all the days we're given. They exchanged rings, simple gold bands that symbolized their unbroken commitment. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Finn pulled Bella into a kiss that sealed their promises and drew cheers from the assembled guests. The celebration continued well into the night, with dancing, feasting, and toasts to the newlyweds. As the evening stars appeared overhead, Finn led his bride away from the festivities toward the small cabin Rollins had given them as a wedding gift, the former line shack where they'd first taken shelter, now expanded and improved into a proper home. It seems fitting, Bella said as they approached the cabin, now adorned with a front porch and curtained windows, beginning our married life where our story began. Finn lifted her into his arms to carry her across the threshold, just as he'd carried her through the blizzard months before. From survival to love, he murmured against her hair, that's the journey we've made. Inside, the cabin was transformed with simple but comfortable furnishings, a wedding quilt on the bed made by Mrs. Rollins and wildflowers in jars on every surface, Bella's touch already evident in their new home. Happy, Mrs. Prescott? Finn asked, setting her gently on her feet. Bella wrapped her arms around his neck, her eyes reflecting the lamplight in something deeper, a love that had survived the harshest winter and promised to bloom through all the seasons to come. More than I ever thought possible, she whispered. You've given me everything, Finn, a home, a future, a heart to match my own. And you gave me back the ability to believe in something beyond survival, he said, his hands gentle on her waist. You gave me a reason to build something lasting in this wild country. As they stood together in the warm light of their new home, the sounds of celebration distant on the evening breeze, Finn marveled at how completely his life had changed. From a solitary cowboy riding alone through a blizzard to a husband, a partner in the ranch, a man with roots and connections and purpose. All because he'd stopped to help a stranger in distress. All because a widow with a heart of gold had seen through his carefully constructed walls to the man beneath who was capable of love after all. Outside, the Montana night spread its star-filled canopy over the land that had brought them together. Inside, Finn and Bella Prescott began the next chapter of their story, no longer strangers thrown together by fate, but partners bound by choice, by love, and by the promise of all the years to come.